Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Faith is doubt. Faith requires doubt. I truly believe this after the last 2 decades of doing this work and having my own personal spiritual life and exploration, that I don't actually think faith is belief. I think that belief is when we know something, when it lives in our bones and we know that it's true. And I think that belief has its role and can be useful in our spiritual lives. But I believe that faith is more powerful and more important because faith is our agency. Faith is our ability to opt in to what we are believing. And it is the way that we engage with our spiritual life. Why does that matter? I think whether you believe in something that is bigger than you believe in, a universal consciousness or, the wisdom of the universe, if you believe in multiple deities or like one single deity, if you believe that, that universal love, if you believe that God and the way that it is talked about, came to live on earth and in human form, that any of those notions are beliefs, right? They are believing. But faith is the part of us that says, really? You want me to believe what? You think what? You think that there's something more than like what I can see and touch? You think that there's something beyond what science can prove? Like, we don't know any of that. How could you possibly invest in it? It's like that voice in our head, that skeptical, maybe even cynical voice in our head that's there really to protect us, I think, is the partner. It is the shadow to our faith. And I believe that real faith, I think real faith requires that doubt to live inside of it in order to give the faith meaning. So I remember when I was in junior high, I was a preteen, and I'd grown up in the same school. I'd always gone to the same elementary school, and for the most part had like known the same people, and everybody was pretty similar. Primarily, some Christian kids, some Jewish kids, but we didn't really talk about God or Jesus or religion really all that much. And, my family also was not particularly religious. And so when I went to this junior high school, it was a much wider and more diverse population. For the first time, I was surrounded by folks who were all different religious traditions. They had different cultural backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, like really just like they were from different parts of the city. And I remember having friends who were Jehovah's Witness. And it was the first time I had ever encountered them. And I was really sort of fascinated by certainly the religious and cultural restrictions that was placed on those, 12 and 13-year-olds about what they could do and couldn't do, and like not celebrating birthdays and things like that. That was sort of an interesting notion to me. But one of the other things that really stuck with me is that even at that age, I had one friend, I remember them saying like, I just like do what's God's will for me. And that idea seemed so comfortable, so reliable. And I was jealous. I thought that, from the outside and also like my limited perception, also being, a 12 or 13-year-old, that those folks just had this like clear instruction and they had no doubt and they were 100% certain. And that is the thing that faith requires us to soften our grip around. faith requires us to soften our attachment to certainty, which is really challenging, I think, for humans. I believe that humans really cling to a sense of certainty, and we often look for the pathways or the options in our life that provide certainty, right? So, growing up in a middle class family in the United States, being born in the 80s, raised in the 80s and the 90s, the certainty was do well in school. If you're a really great student and you pay attention in class and you get good grades and you follow, quote unquote, follow all the rules, then you'll go to college, and you'll get a great education. There also was this certainty, this pathway that oh, well, you'll go to college, you'll get scholarships because you're so achievement oriented. And then once you're in college, you study your major and you graduate, and that all of that will guide you towards having this comfortable, steady, reliable life. That if you do all of that, then you'll get a good job. And with that good job, you'll always make enough money. With that money, you'll be able to buy a home and you'll have a family. And that is the clear and certain path ahead of you. And whether that was something that was ever explicitly stated to me as a kid or to any of us inside of, this American system, the American dream of that your effort is going to be rewarded. That is what is so delicious about that, what is so appealing about that narrative is that it says there is some certainty in life. If you do this, then this will happen. And unfortunately, the reality of our lives is that there comes a moment in time when the certainty we had been promised is lost, right? That everything we thought we knew, the bottom drops out. So for me, and I've shared this story, my certainty was around, that sense of effort that the good guys always won. And that if we just tried hard enough, everything would be okay. And the way, if you haven't listened to the first episode, that's the story that I share about what happened during Hurricane Katrina and my understanding of the world. And in the face of that, shredding, that stripping away of our certainty about the way the world is, or the way that God is, or the way that our family is, or the way society is, when that is lost, we come face to face with doubt, right? If this is everything I believed until now, and now I have direct lived evidence that what I thought was true isn't true, it's faltering. What's on the other side of that is doubt in everything that we have believed until now. And that doubt can often be seen as an enemy. That doubt can be demonized, right? That oh, well, I just need you to trust me, or you need to believe it to achieve it, all of those things, right? Fake it till you make it. A lot of that is one of the ways that we sidestep our doubts. We sidestep our hesitancy or our questioning or our skepticism. And I believe that the act of faith is an act. It's a choice. And that only when we have felt that doubt shake us to our core does the choice of faith matter. I have never known someone who had a really deep, remarkable spiritual connection who wasn't also incredibly intimate with their own doubt of that connection. So when I think about talking to people who are religious in their professional lives, right? Professional pastors or priests, ministers, nuns and monks, and even yoga teachers, that when you really sit down with them, when you really find a place where they feel comfortable and safe and they can share what is true for them, many of them have said to me that there are days, some maybe more days than not, when they're not 100% sure that this God thing is real. that they also like look at the world and say, like, how could there be this much suffering? How could a loving presence allow for all of this challenge to happen? And that if looking at the suffering and the challenges in the world didn't shake their beliefs in a loving God or a loving presence or universal rhythm or dharma, if that didn't shake their belief system, they would actually have lost contact with their conscience and their own inner direction. Their ability to make choices, right? Are this unique gift of being human says that we can choose, right? We have free will. We have free choice. We can choose the direction of our lives. We can choose the direction of our own beliefs, that we can create and recreate the things that we think to be true. We can allow them to change and evolve. And perhaps one of my favorite examples of this is knowing people who have incredibly rich relationships with their, what I call their spirit team, right? Whether that's their, for me, I refer to these sometimes as the council of elders. It is an intuitive connection with maybe those who've gone before, maybe if you are in a Christian tradition or that kind of spiritual lineage, you have a relationship with a saint, right? Or Mary Magdalene, or even with Jesus. If you come from the Indian tradition, right, you have a direct relationship with Krishna or Durga or Shiva or, Parvati, any of those deities. Or you have a deep a deep spiritual animism, a connection to the natural world, right? And when you engage with the natural world, there is a sense that there is a natural rhythm to that. There is like a natural wisdom and order that is unfolding. That even folks who are in those deep contemplative practices also say, sometimes I worry I'm nuts. Are you kidding? I'm like hearing voices in my head. That is like one of the DSM criteria for being institutionalized. I have my own doubts about that for myself as a practitioner, as a teacher. What if all this stuff that we cling to is just a lie that we tell ourselves to feel better? And I remember once asking one of my spiritual mentors that question, like, what if God, what if this like divine higher power is just a lie that we tell ourselves in order to feel better? And she took a beat and she just looked at me and she said, well, do you feel better? And that was a really critical moment for me because it illuminated for me the choice between the faith that there was something bigger and the skepticism that, like, what if it's all a lie, right? What if I'm wrong? And I was aware in that moment, as I have been made aware again and again and again, that when I choose my faith, when I choose to believe that there is higher wisdom available for me, when I choose to believe that there is some cosmic order that is beyond what I could imagine, when I choose to believe that there is an inner spark of eternity, when I choose the faith that my dad left his body, but that he is still around in some form or fashion, that faith, those choices, allow me to navigate my life in a more easeful way. Like it's just more comfortable. I feel more safe. I feel more connected to other people. I feel more connected to myself. That faith gives me the courage to act on both on my convictions and also on my intuition. And without the choice of faith, I think it would lose some of its power. That if I just knew it all for sure, that's what proselytizing proselytizing looks like, right? That's what fanaticism is. Fanaticism says this is the way and there is no other way. And if you don't do it my way, then you're wrong. Faith instead says, I know you're not sure. I know that you have questions. I know that there's no way to be completely certain about this. But in order to live the life that you want to lead, you need to make a choice to believe in this, in something, in the thing that is calling to you. And that faith requires doubt. It cannot exist without doubt. And maybe you want to call doubt the shadow of faith. But in this sort of non-dualistic approach that I try to take to everything, to me, what that means is that faith is doubt. Faith is living in the question and making a choice to move in the way that we wish, without blinders, without ignoring any evidence that we get to the contrary. And we'll talk about humility as a practice in another episode. But the next step is perhaps like the way that we put this into practice, which is that we find ways of acting on our faith. We find ways of experimenting. So it's not just an intellectual exercise. This is a lived experience of being aware of our intuition, being aware of guidance that we're being given, being aware of the messages that we receive in meditation practice, or what happens when we sit in prayer or contemplation. The energy that arises when we sit and watch a sunset and just witness the majesty of the universe. And when we then take that and act on it without certainty, without knowledge or confirmation of the outcome, knowing that there is no guarantee. And then we watch what unfolds after that. So maybe in the world right now, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questioning and a lot of confusion. I just had a wonderful conversation that you'll hear soon with a guest about the way that AI is completely reshaping the world, the way that this new technology, this new tool is going to shake the foundations of the way we see ourselves at work, the way that we interact with people, the way that we navigate our own creative power. And it's certainly easy to lean into the challenges that will arise and to allow our skepticism and our cynicism to come to the fore. But I think it's important for us, even in that moment, to make space for intuitive guidance around what the next right steps are for us. That to believe that perhaps there is a higher wisdom at play that we are completely ignorant to right now, that's probably higher and wider than our human consciousness could hold, that allows for more freedom and more space for us. And when we operate from that place, I think we experience that freedom and that openness in the moment. That freedom comes from our choice of faith, from holding the doubt, the hesitancy, the skepticness inside of us, and choosing our faith, the faith to believe in our own magic, the faith to believe in the interconnectedness of all beings now on the planet and that have always existed. Our faith to believe in something that's greater than us, that holds us with profound compassion and kindness and generosity and love. And I believe that choice of faith, that that leaning into our faith with its doubt is essential on this spiritual path. And it is a practice, and it is something that we navigate every single day. And the moment that we think our doubt has been buried eternally is the moment that we have lost our humility and our groundedness and our real connection to what's on the other side of that faith. So, my prayer for you is that the next time you wonder if all this stuff is nuts, if you're just wasting your time with prayer and meditation, if you should just get on to the next thing that is productive, if maybe all these crystals are just rocks, if all of the horoscopes or the human design or the yoga or the meditation that you've learned so far is just a distraction, I hope that you will remember that those fragments, those glimmers of doubt, are essential in this process, and that you will keep them close like friends. May your faith bring you profound peace, and may you never be lulled by the mirage of certainty. Be well. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.